in the professional field for a few years. I was just starting to really gain momentum in my upward trajectory of singing, making the connections. And I was on tour with the Santa Fe Opera. After a couple days, the cold went away, but I still could not sing. One thing about singers that's unique, I think, is that every musician identifies with their instrument, but with singers especially, it's part of our body. And so
It's you, yeah.
it's me. So I associated that so much with my identity and my worth. Singing was one of the things that I feel like I've had a gift for, but I've also worked really hard to develop it. And it was something I felt made me unique. It was like, I felt like this was my light, and I was, not going to hide it under a bushel. And then it was taken away, and I was like, well, now what do I do? They had to cancel the rest of the tour, and that was devastating because not only did I feel let down, but I felt like I was letting everybody else down. So it was a pretty dark period for me. Someone was giving a talk about Joseph Smith being in Liberty Jail, and he said, "The Lord, hath descended below them all. Art thou greater than he?" It kind of puts things into perspective. And it wasn't too long after that I finally just decided to put it in his hands. Not because I felt like I could move on, but because I couldn't really handle it on my own anymore, if that makes sense. Yeah, like I said, that day I turned it over to him is when I got the phone call from parents saying, "You should go see this speech therapist." And that was the start of me, having hope.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. One of my favorite parts about doing this show is that I get to interview people from the school that I attended at BYU. And when I first got injured, I thought I was one of the only ones. And then as I started sharing my experience with more people, especially around my school, I realized that there were more and more people that had gone through injury in our School of Music, including the professors. And today I have the immense privilege of interviewing one of them. He is our director of opera at Brigham Young University, and I've heard his voice many times, and every time I'm just blown away. And so I love his voice so much. And so I'm grateful to have him on the show today and having our first vocalist actually on the show. And I've been looking forward to this one for so long, just because I know that there are vocalists out there that are listening who have been wanting to have a vocalist on the show so that they can hear their experience. So thank you so much, Professor Shea Owens. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So as I was talking to you before we started recording, this podcast is really an opportunity that I love to give people to share their stories of their injury, because I haven't met anybody who hasn't had an impactful injury, or their injury hasn't had a huge impact on them in a very positive way, as well as like the hardships and things that go along with that. And so I just want to invite you to start wherever you'd like with your experience with injury.
Sure. So let's see. I think it was 2015, summer of that. I was on tour for the Santa Fe Opera, and by this point, I'd been in the professional field for a few years. I was just starting to really gain momentum in my upward trajectory of singing, making the connections. And I was on tour with the Santa Fe Opera, one of the more prestigious opera companies, summer festivals in our nation. And I was doing a tour with them, a small show, or outreach and things like that. And in the middle of our tour, I came down with a cold, which happens. Singers dread it, any kind of illness, because obviously you can't, these don't function when you're sick. You can't sing. And so I was like, we had to cancel one of the shows while I recovered. And then after a couple days, the cold went away, but I still could not sing. And we went and saw an ENT who was in the area, and he couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Had to cancel another show, saw a second ENT, also couldn't really diagnose me, although he said you should probably go on vocal rest and not sing anymore. So with that recommendation, they canceled the tour, the rest of the tour. And I was, I trusted his judgment, and took a few weeks to try and figure some things out. And ultimately, I had to cancel my upcoming contract with Santa Fe that summer. I was going to be a part of their summer festival and sing. So that was a rough time. It wasn't just the loss of the job, but it was also the loss of one thing about singers that's unique, I think, is that every musician identifies with their instrument, but with singers especially, it's part of our body. And so
it's you, yeah.
it's me. So I associated that so much with my identity and my worth. And once that was taken away, once I couldn't sing, that was probably the hardest thing for me to deal with. So I went through many months of struggle, of feeling lost, wondering, what I was going to do. I don't know, we can, I'm giving you the brief summary. We can go into more detail if you want, later in the podcast. But it wasn't until I finally accepted the fact that this could be my new reality. And I got a blessing, and I took it to God, and I said, you gave me this gift, God giveth and God taketh away. If this is thy will, help me know what I need to do next. Help me find a new path. Help me hang on to the fact that I know that I'm a child of God and I have worth in that sense, but, help me find what else I need to do. I will be done. And the day I came to that conclusion and I offered that prayer, got a call from a very good friend of mine, another singer, Erin Morley. If you haven't heard of her, look her up. She's amazing. LDS operatic soprano, singing all over the world. She called and she said, "Hey, I heard you're going through something. Why don't you go see this speech therapist I know in New York, former singer. She helped me out when I was having some struggles." Went to go see her, and making a long story short, she correctly diagnosed me with vocal paresis, which is a form of paralysis in a way, that I'd gotten a weird virus and it affected one of my vocal folds. So one of them was vibrating, functioning correctly. The other one wasn't. There had been some nerve damage. And she said, "But all hope is not lost." She said, "You were told to go on vocal rest." She said, "If you want to sing again, you have to do the opposite. You have to do daily vocal exercises, and you'll have to learn how to sing again." And so she gave me daily exercises to do. And over a period of months, she basically, with the help of her and my voice teacher, Daryl Babbage, I learned how to sing again. And so many lessons from there that I'd love to unpack if you have time and want to, regarding my identity, my worth, and just, a better grasp and understanding of my instrument, learning more skills, being a better singer in general, and not taking it for granted. And I think that's given me a new perspective. So when, I used to dread people asking me to sing outside of the professional realm, you go home to your parents' ward, they say, "Oh, will you sing for us?" I used to dread that. It's like, you hear musicians being asked, "Sing something for me." It's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah,
I'm an
exactly.
accountant. Okay, do my taxes and I'll sing for you.
There you
But
go.
I've become so grateful to have been given this back, and to have found this therapist and my teacher who helped me learn how to sing again. That I don't want to hide this gift. I want to show God how grateful I am to have it back. So I sing for my mother at her ward. I'll sing for church events, for community events, and other things like that. I'm so grateful to have that back, and yeah, and I'm also glad that you're doing this podcast to help musicians know that there's hope even when you get something you love so dearly taken away from you. It may not always be given back in some circumstances. Like I was very fortunate and blessed, but I think one of the most important things to remember is that each of us have worth and value beyond our musical abilities.
Absolutely. Man, yeah, you're right. There's so much I want to ask you about just right off the bat. The first thing, it was interesting. I told you this is the second interview I've done today. And
Yeah.
the other interview I did today was from a very, very prominent recording trumpet player in LA. He's always in the studios. And we were talking about the struggle it is for freelance trumpet players, especially in an environment like Los Angeles, if they're going through something, to take time off, because it's kind of a next man up situation up there, or over there. And so when you said that, that they canceled the shows, because of what you were going through, that really surprised me. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, is that, coming from a trumpet player who's never done something like that, is that something that's normal? If somebody does get injured, or one of the more prominent musicians in the production gets injured, that the show gets canceled or postponed, or there's an understudy. I mean, I've been on stage productions as well, and usually there's an understudy involved. What's that process like?
Sure. I think it depends on the company and the situation. In this particular instance, we were on a tour, a very small production with just a few people. And it was a show they created specifically for this tour. So it wasn't like an existing role, like an opera. It was a unique show. And actually based off of words and music. The theme was like one person saying music's more important, another saying words is more important. It was very clever. And people who performed it for all loved it. But they couldn't bring in a ringer and do that show at the last minute. And that's kind of a risk the love companies have to take, especially with singers, because they just don't have the resources to, fly someone in, house them, help them learn the music and bring them alongside, just in case. So they kind of, fly by the seat of their pants in that respect. But some companies can't afford that. They have understudies who can go on if something happens. And many a career has been made from in German they called an Einspringen. I lived in Switzerland for a few years, and singers get sick all the time. It's just kind of an accepted fact. So somebody new will jump in, and then once you've performed a role like that, you instantly gain credibility, and it makes it easier for you to get jobs other places. But that's always hard. Because if you don't sing, generally you don't get paid. That's just kind of the historical precedent, is getting paid per show, right? I think there's slow momentum to kind of change that. Now, a lot of musicians are getting, a living stipend. They also get paid, a show fee in advance. So there's movement in the right direction, so that, I hope it moves more so in that direction, because right now the musicians, the freelancers, we're assuming all the risk when we block out our calendars,
and that's the reason why I asked, is because it seems, and I may be misinterpreting the situation, but it seems like they were willing to work with you as best they could with regards to your injury, because I guess, because of the circumstances they had to, but also, that's, like I said, that's sometimes the impetus of, or the reason behind, musicians postponing prioritizing their recovery because they don't want to lose
Yeah,
their gig, right? But if there's
exactly.
that thing in place, which I assumed maybe I'm incorrectly assuming, but that was in place to help you get better. And I'm just wondering, like, what were their reactions when you said, like, hey, I can't sing?
Oh, it was bad, especially in that thing. I mean, it's one thing to, have to bow out and at least the show can still go on because somebody else is there. But we tried doing the show and like altering some of my notes. We tried everything we could to keep the show going. I did have some concern for my long-term vocal health, but I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. But I couldn't really phonate above a middle C. And if, that's, I'm a baritone, but still the classical rep, I sing, a fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth above that. And even the notes that I could phonate on, they didn't have support and I didn't have the stamina that I used to have. And so they had to cancel the rest of the tour. And that was devastating because not only did I feel let down, but I felt like I was letting everybody else down. So it was a pretty dark period for me.
Well, everyone, and I'm sure everyone listening who's been through an injury can definitely relate. It's for me,
Yeah.
it was, the momentum that I was picking up, and not wanting to let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I had actually gone through the whole audition cycle for school, and then 2 weeks into the semester, I had to drop it all and kind of leave my professors hanging in that regard. And so that pressure is real. It's not something that we can just easily brush off and say, okay, yeah, just do what your body tells you and everything will be fine and dandy. No, it's still tough,
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, how did you come to that decision? It was like, no, if I don't take care of this, then who knows what's going to happen,
You mean to bow out of the show?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, I was just kind of forced to. I couldn't perform. I was just that was the hand I was dealt. Um, and then, I had to cancel upcoming contracts because I tried a lot of things to figure out what was wrong, and I just couldn't. So, I didn't want to. I felt like I would do more damage going into the upcoming summer contract, not being able to fulfill my obligations, rather than telling them at least with some notice that, hey, I've got this issue, I can't figure it out. So I just gotta respectfully bow out. So I was more forced into that. It reminds me of the scripture in Alma where, some people choose to be humble and some are compelled to be humble. In
Right.
this
Yeah.
case, I was sort of compelled to bow out just purely by the fact that I couldn't sing in the normal way that I had sung before. I couldn't sing the repertoire that I was able to sing. So,
And it's so hard. Like, man, I feel for that. It's, I feel like as musicians, there's a huge part of the reason why we do what we do is we want to help others feel the joy that we feel with music. And when we can't do that with the injury, that's just like, for me, that's worse than the actual injury. It's the psychological part of it. It's honestly harder than the physical pain. I mean, everybody's injury is different, but for me, and I'm not sure if the same is for you, but that's kind of how it goes,
Oh yeah.
And then so you get home from that event and you're going through this recovery process, and you said that it involved this huge identity reevaluation or shift. And so what was that process like? Like where did you see kind of different, I don't know if benchmark is the right word, but what helped you to kind of make that journey towards kind of getting away from your musician's identity being the only thing that you had?
Yeah. Well, I didn't come to it right away, certainly. It was a pretty dark time, just trying to figure things out. My wife at the time was still working. And and she would have to travel back and forth. So I was often on my own, sometimes with her, sometimes on my own. And it was a lot. It's hard to describe because I've been removed from it for a while, but I can really feel for people who say that they are depressed, and it's not something you can just shrug off and say, well, be happy. It's like,
Absolutely not.
it was this, it felt like a literal weight on my shoulders, that I was letting people down, that I was letting God down, but at the same time, I was also angry with God. Like, why'd you let this happen? Um, Singing was one of the things that I've always had I feel like I've had a gift for, but I've also worked really hard to develop it. And it was something I felt made me unique. It was like, I felt like this was my light, and I was, not going to hide it under a bushel. I was going to let it shine, and I was going to do so much good with it. And then it was taken away, and I was like, well, now what do I do? It felt like all that time, all that practicing, all those hours, um, all that money and earning degrees and all that time,
Seriously.
was that all wasted? And there were some pretty key um, spiritual moments that I recall. One thing that I'm grateful that I continued to do, um, even when I traveled and was in an unfamiliar place, was I continued to attend church, even if it was just sacrament meeting, because I didn't feel like talking to a lot of other people. And Lord spoke to me in various ways, either through the hymns or through talks. Sometimes it wouldn't even be related to what people were saying, but I would just get this thought or this impression. One of the most striking for me was someone was giving a talk about Joseph Smith being in Liberty Jail, and he said, "The Lord, hath descended below them all. Art thou greater than he?" It kind of puts things into perspective. Like, wow, yeah, he suffered far worse things than I'm suffering. And it wasn't too long after that I finally just decided to put it in his hands, not because I felt like I could move on, but because I couldn't really handle it on my own anymore, if that makes sense. Just decided to turn it over to him, saying I'd looked into some like other jobs potentially, and none of them really panned out. But I put it in his hands, said, "Thy will be done. If it is thy will that I not sing again, so be it. I accept that. I can still play a little piano. I did find some solace in that, and playing the piano. So I spent many a long night playing songs that I used to sing, wondering if I'd ever be able to sing them again. And like I said, that day I turned it over to him is when I got the phone call from Aaron saying, "You should go see this speech therapist." And that was the start of me like having hope. So yeah, I know that the Lord will help us. It may not always turn out the way we think it will. I can't promise anyone out there that they lose their voice, they'll get it back. I happen to be fortunate, but we can put it in his hands, and he can heal us. He healed me, helped me find worth. And you know what, if something happened, God forbid something happened tomorrow, I couldn't sing anymore, I'd be okay, because of this experience I went through, because I know I have worth and talent, and I have gifts, other gifts and skills that I can use to help take care of my family, build his kingdom. It's one of the most important lessons of my life that I learned through experiencing this trial.
So beautiful, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing the role that your faith has played in my. I mean, for me personally, that's been a huge part of it as well. For me, it's like every time I've been like, okay, is this it? Like, is this the end of the road for trumpet in my life?
Yeah.
I just have gotten the impression to just keep moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
and just so and for everybody out there who's listening and may not be a member or of any particular faith, the principle of just having faith, I think, is really important. That that things will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. The whole thing that I try to focus on with the show is that that everything outside of your instrument, if done correctly and invested in correctly in your life, can make your musicianship that much more fulfilling for you and fulfilling for others, because it's not the end all be all of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it always has to be an injury to, it doesn't always have to be an injury to learn that lesson, but that seems to be a huge causal factor for it. But another thing,
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
say something on that too? I'm speaking from a LDS perspective, but I think any musician, no matter what faith tradition you may or may not be a part of, the fact that you're a musician, you already have, if we can call it faith, you're believing in something higher. You're creating something to give to other people. So there's an element of generosity in that, of light and of power. And I think you're absolutely right. If there's other ways that you can contribute to that. If not music, then after an injury, you can channel that in other ways. But I think that's one of the most wonderful things as a part of our career that we do, is that we can create such wonderful beauty by ourselves or in collaboration with others, and we share that. It's a gift to other people. So,
hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I have wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, so well put. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about that I know a lot of musicians can relate to is this element of expression, like you've been talking about, that's so integral to our craft and how we express ourselves to others, but also to ourselves through our craft. And one of the biggest feelings of losses that I experience, I know people that I've talked to that listen to the show have experienced, is that loss of the ability to express themselves the way that they're used to musically, right? Mm-hmm. And what types of things did you do during your recovery and when you weren't able to sing? You kind of alluded to it with the piano, but I think that musical recovery and musical health is a very real thing. When we're not mm-hmm. able to do our main thing, that we are able to do something to be able to express that part of ourselves through music. Mm-hmm. And so what types of things did you do, or that maybe looking back that you maybe wish you had done?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Like I mentioned, piano was one of the cathartic, therapeutic things I did. Also, a lot of listening to music, and some of the songs that I listened to a lot that really resonated with me. I still can't listen to them today without tearing up, because they were part of my healing. So I still tried to have some musical element, even if I couldn't be the one to, express it with my voice. I still tried to make that a part of my life. I also did a lot of writing. Um, I became really great at keeping a journal. I'm not as good now as I used to be, but I just had a lot of feelings, a lot of things I was trying to figure out. And um, yeah, I have very detailed journal entries from this, process from when I was going through that. And I'm so grateful that I have those now because I can look back and reflect and see how I've grown and some of those experiences I've been able to share with others, and helping them in dealing with, feelings of loss or, depression or massive change. So writing was a really great outlet for me. Um, yeah. And I think what's also really important that I would love for your listeners to know if they're experiencing some kind of musical injury like this is to have a good support team or group of people in your corner. Um, I had some very close friends, and this is not necessarily related to the podcast, but I was also separated from my then wife at the time. I was going through this injury, so to put insult to injury, that was pretty rough. So I had several people, a close friend, a mentor, and my voice teacher who were, I really could say, in my corner for me. I could call them any time of the day. They gave me, you know, career advice, at least, what to do in this weird point. They would encourage me. They would just be a listening ear when I wanted to vent or just share how I was feeling. They listened and didn't judge or, try to, find solutions right away. And that was a huge help just to know that I had people that were there for me. So for any listeners out there, that could be family, but maybe it isn't. Maybe you need to find support elsewhere, but find a few key people that you can rely on, that you can call. That was, I think, absolutely crucial for me in, well, as you said, in continuing to move forward, even though I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you went there because that was exactly where I wanted to go next. Is the importance of community. Because what I realized, and so many people that I've interviewed have came to this same realization. Is like when you're going through an injury and you can't perform. Like music's a wonderful thing, in that most of the time, at least for instrumentalists, I may be wrong with vocalists as much, but you're surrounded by musicians with the same goal as yourself in like a band or small group, chamber group, whatever. And that loss of just that camaraderie is also a really difficult thing to deal with. And so finding ways to still stay connected with that group. I'm curious, in addition to having that support team, which is, you put it so beautifully, because without that support team, it just makes it that much harder, What types of things did you do to kind of maintain that connection to your tribe? I don't know how else to put it,
Yeah,
your
community.
musical community. Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, when this initially happened, I wasn't even at home. I was on the road, like I said, for Santa Fe, and I stayed there for a while because my wife had work there, and then we separated at one point, and then I went home. But musicians travel a lot, so I think finding a community where you're at, it can be challenging, but it's really important. For many people, that's church. Find a local church to go to, or find a book club. It's a Facebook group. Some people, local bike club. I don't know. Just I would find something where you can connect with people. I know a lot of singers like to find community support outside their musical group, just because, you work with these people all day, doing your craft, and sometimes they're the last people you want to hang out with
Yeah,
at
true,
night
true that.
when you're done.
Yeah.
But it depends on the group, depends on the person. I think it's also important to know yourself and what you need. If you're an introvert, then maybe best thing for you is to find like an online group that you could interact with, kind of when it's comfortable for you. If you're an extrovert, then maybe find something in person that you could attend. For me, I found a church community in Santa Fe, and then when I went home to my home ward, they were a great help. My neighbors. Sometimes I feel like we don't know our neighbors anymore, but
It's
at
true.
the time
Yeah.
at the time I did know my neighbors, and they were great. They'd check in on me, see if I needed a meal or something. Um, let's see. That's all that's coming to mind right now. Um, yeah, but I would say find a group, find a community, because we all need that. We're social creatures, whether that's you know whether that's how do I say it, whether it gives us energy as extroverts, or whether it kind of drains us, or introverts, we need alone time to recharge. I know how that is. We all need interaction of some kind.
Yeah, and I
So
think that awareness is really important well, it's important to go through the process of becoming aware of what you need,
hmm
because with a lot of injuries, like overuse injuries,
hmm
those are caused from a lack of awareness,
yeah,
right?
right,
And as you recover, hopefully what's going on is you're becoming more aware of not only what you need musically, but also what you need just to function as a human being and to live a fulfilled life. And I think that going through an injury, recovering from an injury, is a really opportune time to be able to do that,
yeah,
because the some of the pressures that come with being a musician are not there for a season, and then you're
hmm
able to really come to know yourself a lot more. And then when you come back, if that's the path that is there for you, then you come back so much more fulfilled, and you're able to bring so much more to your craft, right?
exactly,
As you said,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And if I could offer one thing, kind of on the other side of the coin here, one other thing I got involved with too was the Just Serve app.
Oh yeah,
For people who don't know, that's a great way to sign up for a service in your community. And, along with being aware and doing, self-care, getting to know yourself, what you need, I think it's also important to look outside yourself for opportunities to help others.
absolutely,
I don't think it has to be an either or. It can be and.
absolutely.
You find time for yourself, but also find time to help others, even when you're feeling at your lowest, and somebody may be going through something terrible. But it's one of the best ways to just get positive vibes, positive energy going again, is to just find a way to help somebody else in your community. So I'd say that is very important for me, as well, for my healing.
Totally. And that's actually one of the first times that's been brought up is I mean, it's just a principle of life, is that you there's a saying out there. It's like, when you're feeling helpless, get helpful, right?
Yes. Oh, that's great.
It's one of those things. It's one of those bumper stickerisms,
Yes.
but it's so true. I mean, it's just, we feel better when we're helping others feel better. It's part of being
Yeah.
a social creature. And
hmm
that comes in so many different forms. I actually used that recently, and was able to get in some cool opportunities through that. And there's so many things out there. I mean, you don't have to go far to find someone who needs just someone,
Right. Yeah.
and that can be so healing for you personally.
Yeah.
One other thing, I want to kind of transition to another topic here. So you were a touring musician at this point, and then I don't know, did you have any other teaching gigs before you came to BYU, or was this?
I mostly taught privately.
Okay.
Yeah, but not in the capacity, directing capacity I do now.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of
Okay.
BOU is my first official, uh, job as director, but I feel like I had wonderful, solid foundation from my teachers. And well, your musicians and listeners will know this. Some people you work with and they inspire you, and some people uh, maybe don't.
Maybe not less so. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe less so. And I've worked with a number of directors that way. I'm like, oh, if they can only do it like this, or if they do it like that, and yeah, I have the chance to direct, and I'm loving it, and I think our shows are going
Well,
pretty well so far.
I love the fruits of your labor. So I go to
Oh,
as many as
thanks.
I can.
Oh, thanks.
So one of the I've had many teachers on the show as well, and
Hmm.
they have all mentioned how much their injury affected how they interact with their students.
Hmm.
From specifically from like helping their students stay healthy, obviously, right?
Hmm.
And so, how did your injury kind of affect, even though it was something that was out of your control, right? It was an illness.
Hmm.
How did your injury affect how you, or influence how you taught moving forward?
Yeah. Well, it helped me become just more aware of vocal illness in general. I think already as a singer, I was hyper aware of my body. Some, other musicians may even accuse us of being, oh, what's that word? Where you make a small injury into something really bigger. Hypochondriac, is that the right word?
I don't
Not
know.
sure.
I always heard it as mountain out of a molehill. You know.
Yeah, that could be true too. Just because we're so sensitive to this, if anything's happening, I think we're generally aware of it because then we can't phonate, we can't sing, we don't get paid. Um, but so, so just I mean, going through the injuries just kind of gave me, and not just this one, but others, other illnesses and things that would happen, taught me a lot about specifically vocal illness, like. Um, and I kept pretty detailed records of when I was younger the things I did, like when I sang and what I sang, and like how I was feeling. And so I had notes on if I sang a particular aria and how it felt, and then I was able to think about if something had affected me, the day before. It's like, oh, was I really hydrated that day? Or, oh, I probably stayed up a little later than I should have. I didn't sleep well. Or, oh, I was taking this allergy medication. Come to find out later, like, there's certain allergy meds that dry you out. They're not good for your voice. When a cold starts up, I can still sing a role to some extent when the cold starts once it's up here, but then once it settles in my chest, I can't. So I know that, I need to bow out at that point. Um, so basically just experiencing it gave me a little more knowledge and understanding. And I wouldn't say for the singers listening, well, I guess it could apply to other musicians as well. Uh, for me, there's no secret sauce or trick to being healthy. It's the stuff that we all know we should do: sleep and eat healthily and stay hydrated. Especially for singers. Pound that water. Um, yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
It does. It does. Because, it's sometimes the most obvious answers are the ones we need to hear the most,
Yeah,
It certainly was the case for me.
yeah.
And I've realized, looking back and just observing some of my colleagues, student musicians, not just at BYU, but just in general, is like we get so focused in what goes on in the practice room or preparing
Hmm.
for what's going to go on stage that those things obviously go out the window.
Hmm.
And then we don't realize, oh, if we're taking the time to do those things, those self-care things, those holistically healthy
Yeah,
things, exercise even, that's that investment of time is going to pay off in the practice room, and
yeah,
it's going to give you the longevity that you're hoping for, even if it's implicitly or like
yeah,
subconsciously hoping for.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. And I
so,
think, can I say
oh, go ahead.
one more
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
to that? One
please.
thing I think I'm by no means an expert in this field, but the information that we're getting nowadays is showing more and more the connection between the physical, the mental, the emotional. All that stuff's
Absolutely.
interconnected. So, as while I say, sleep and hydrating and eating is important, it's just as important to try and be in a good place mentally and emotionally, because that will certainly have an impact on the creativity that you can give to your craft, how well you play, how long you can play. All that has a big impact. So, yeah, sometimes, I would say if you're not in a good environment, see if you can place yourself in a good environment, or do what you need to get in a better place. So,
Yeah, totally. Totally. I loved reading. I mean, that I've never been somebody who just like reads research for fun,
mhm.
but now I am with that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is the stuff that makes, like, this is how I learned how to be a better musician with all these
Mhm.
different things. And it's just stuff that you would have never heard before. Cause it's gotten to the point for me where if like I go to a clinic at a convention, like a trumpet convention or a jazz convention, I'm not going to the clinics that teach me how to, like, this is how you play your, use your scales to,
Mhm.
improvise this or whatever. Like, I've heard so many pedagogical things, and those are all important to learn, right?
Yeah.
But I've heard all of them so much, and all that's left for me is to apply them. But with this side of the game, this mental, psychological, physical, kind of optimal peak performance type stuff,
Mhm.
that's the stuff where I'm like, okay, this is where the knowledge is still, like, I need to learn more so I can keep applying it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I got another question for you. I'm curious, with if you were to have a student, you probably already have in your career, but have a student who comes to you with an injury and there, or an illness, I guess is probably a more common thing that you deal with. But what types of things do you coach them through with all of the different things that are probably going through their head? They've got
Mhm.
the show coming up, or what is the process that you kind of take them through to kind of get them to be able to go through that recovery process in a beneficial way
Mhm.
to them?
Yeah. Sure. Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to claim to
Sure,
be.
sure.
So, if it's something serious, I'll certainly refer them to a professional. Um, if it's something that seems like it's a cold, um, then, and if they have something coming up, just specifically for the voice, I can help them, figure out, techniques, or maybe little changes they could make to try and, get through the role. Um, it's pretty common in the singer community to know that if you have the start of a cold, you may be able to still do the role, but once it settles into your chest, that's the feeling, not necessarily physiologically what's happening. But when it goes into your lungs, then your folds won't function the same way, and you kind of have to bow out. Other things like don't take ibuprofen
Hmm.
because that could injure. It does something. Um, Sorry, it's late. I'm trying to. Not all my words are coming, but ibuprofen can affect blood flow, and you could actually have a big injury when taking that and when you're singing. Allergy meds dry you out, so I let them know. I have them ask me what their symptoms are. Generally, if there's a fever, I tell them to go home and rest and hydrate. Um, yeah, if it's a cold, try and help them. Trying to think what else there is. If it's anything more serious, I'll usually refer them to a professional. Often, sometimes you have to get a second opinion because, again, in my experience, I had two ENTs who didn't know what I had. But the other hard thing is I know a lot of freelance musicians maybe don't have insurance, health insurance, or are going without it. And that landscape in our country, depending on which state you live in, can be fairly good or not good at all. So that's another challenge, is deciding when you need to put up that money and just go see someone to diagnose you and tell you what's wrong, so that then you can make an informed decision about what to do.
Sure.
No easy answer to that. But when it's your livelihood, when it's your income, sometimes you have to, make the hard choices. I'll put this money goes to a specialist, tells me I can't play for a little bit. I'll do that. So
Definitely. And kind of part two of that question is, with that illness or injury comes that questioning of identity, right?
mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, not all the time. When you do have a student who's going through that, what do you do to help them, coach them through that part of the process?
Yeah. Excellent question. Most of the students I teach are from a Christian background, and it's our belief that every human, every soul is a child of God, and they have eternal value and eternal worth, and that we will exist, beyond this life. And so I try to be there as a support for them and help them understand that. It's sort of like faith or a testimony. You can't, necessarily force it on somebody else, but if someone's heart is open, then, maybe, you can get a little faith off of someone else's faith and testimony. Yeah, it's not easy when something like this happens. Like I was saying earlier, something you put so much time and effort into, and then it's taken away. That also presents an opportunity for growth, as I think you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in that, and so that could be an opportunity for, when we encounter something like that, an opportunity for us to discover something more about ourselves. One of the apostles of the LDS Church, his name was Neil A. Maxwell. He used to say, "Lord, if I have to learn patience, let's get it over with right now."
Yeah, right. Totally.
Or, excuse me. If I have to learn something, how am I going to learn it? Show me this. Sometimes we're tested in ways we don't anticipate, but it's, sorry, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. Maybe it's getting a little late for me, but I think one of the most important things we can do is keep our hearts soft and teachable. And then we'll be open to the lessons. If for some people that's God teaching the lessons, if it's for somebody else, the universe, or just, yourself. I think remaining humble and teachable and open to other opportunities, other good influences. Being open to that is the best way that we can, retain a sense of worth, a sense of identity, and discover new things about ourselves that perhaps we would never have discovered if not for this trial, this injury we're going through.
Yeah, it's that's the hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting through, not getting through, but coming out the other side a different person, changing,
Yeah.
right, becoming.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's such a funny quote from Elder Maxwell, because goodness knows we all need a little more patience, and that's the thing we want right now,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Professor Owens. I don't know
Sure.
to call you Shea or Professor Owens, but
it's fine, either one.
What I really was looking forward to was just, apart from just hearing your story, is really just understanding, as a trumpet player, but also as a hobby vocalist, I guess, a hobby singer, is just really understanding what vocalists go through when it comes to injury. And I know a lot of people out there listening definitely learned a lot today. Kind of just, I want to ask you one last question before we start to wrap things up, but have you noticed in your teaching if there are different, I don't know if pedagogical practice is the right word, but like contributors to injury that lead vocalists to unhealthy habits from a pedagogical standpoint?
Sure. Um, my colleagues and I, and most voice teachers who know their stuff, will talk a lot about the breath. There's this, I don't have paper with me right now, but one of the very basic foundational principles we talk about is the Bernoulli principle. In fact, that if you have like two pieces of paper, or even think about an airplane wing, as soon as, the uneven wing, air moves over one side, moves over faster than the other side, and that lifts the plane. You can demonstrate this also with two pieces of paper. If you blow air through them slowly, they'll stay apart. But if you blow the air quickly, they'll come together. And that's essentially what your vocal folds are doing. And we teach singers to trust the air and the breath, and to let that be the folds coming together. There's all kinds of musculature and other things in here that when supported by the breath, they do the right thing. But so often we try to control them in a way that's unhealthy. If we're squeezing, or if we're bearing down, and it's tricky because we can't see it. So we sometimes some people learn physiologically. You explain what's happening in here to them, or some people do better with visuals. Say, think of like this, and try something like this. So that's been a fun challenge, is trying to learn how my students learn, and then know how to teach them correctly. But that's one of the biggest things I would say, is just using the breath to support your singing, and not trying to tighten or stiffen up here. I would also say, especially for classical style singing, I would say that's something that, Renee Fleming called it the heavy weightlifting of the singing world. And there's a reason, because operatic singing, classical singing, you don't use microphones. You train to be, heard in a big hall without the use of amplification. And if not done properly, that takes a big toll, because you're moving air very quickly through your folds, and it's an athletic thing to be able to do that and sing for very, very long phrases. And I think if you start training that too young, you can burn out. If you remember singers like Charlotte Church, maybe I'm too old, but also there's a few young singers every few years on America's Got Talent. They come and they bring up this child prodigy who sings an opera aria, and people love it. And I shake my head, because it's not a style that young children should be singing. I don't know if this is helpful for your listeners, but if you notice, they all burn out. They're not really singing anymore. At least the ones I know. At least the ones I know of. May not be the case for everybody, but the musculature and having the larynx settle, that all just takes time and maturity. So I generally don't start teaching students until high school at the earliest technique. Before that, ear training is great. Learning another instrument, so they can sound like they're on pitch, things like that. For any of your other musicians out there who are looking to teach voice, I would generally avoid actual technique and breath support training until they're a little bit older. Was that remind me of your question? Did that answer it?
Yeah, no,
I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent, but
no, I was just wondering what the pedagogical contributors to injury are for vocalists, because there's a lot with every family of instruments, misconceptions with pedagogy that lead to injury, or stuff like that. I tell my ward choir too. There's this old tradition. I don't know where it came from, but I encounter people who say, I didn't drink or eat before a performance. I'm like, that's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should absolutely be eating and drinking before you perform. Your folds need the nutrients to function. They're coming together at an incredibly fast rate. It's actually amazing. If you've never seen a vocal folds, being scoped while somebody's phonating, it's incredible. There's two tiny little
pieces of flesh that come together and can
Yeah.
create amazing sounds. They need nutrients. They need water. They need sleep. Um, and our bodies are generally very good at telling us when something is wrong, unless we have made a habit of ignoring it. So, if anything starts to hurt in here, there's a good chance that probably something's not going the way it should. So, yeah, listen to your body. That's what I would say.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's the thing. That's the biggest pedagogical advice that we could give, right? Is just
Hmm.
listen to your body. Who was it? I actually think it was one of my professors at BYU who said that she had she was in a voice lesson and she had gotten a piece of instruction from her teacher at the time. I might be butchering the details, but it felt physically uncomfortable and like not right with her body.
Hmm.
And so we kind of have to be our own authorities at sometimes, just to
Yeah.
allow
Yeah,
ourselves
exactly.
to know what our body needs and what
Hmm.
our body is disagreeing with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, playing a musical instrument is not a natural thing, but we shouldn't be swimming completely upstream all the time.
Right. Right. I'll throw out one other tip specifically for any singers who are listening. One good exercise to do to help know if you're able to sing, if you can sing, or you're feeling slightly ill, is to do a siren. Try it on a lip buzz or on an eval. I'm tired, so you had heard a little crack in there. But if you're able to do that without cracking and there's not a break, then you're probably okay to still sing as long as you take it easy, really lean on your breath support. But if you notice that there are gaps in there, that means your folds are probably swollen, and it's probably not the best idea for you to sing. Just a little specific pedagogical tidbit out there, a thing that and these singers can try to gauge what how their vocal folds are doing.
That's great. No, thank you so much for sharing that. A lot
Yeah,
of people out there will be grateful that you shared that.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This is just from the get go. It was filling my heart just to hear your story and just hear your progression through and how your injury has benefited you.
oh,
At the end of
thanks.
every episode, I ask two questions, and it's what I mean. I look forward to the end of each interview just so I can ask these questions, not because it's the end.
Hmm.
And the first one is if somebody were to approach you and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast or to Trust the Process and your episode on it, your conversation with Clark. I'm a cellist or trumpet player or vocalist even. Doesn't matter what the instrument is, but what piece of advice would you give that person?"
Hmm. And what question are they asking? No,
Just
no specific question.
I need advice. I'm going through an injury and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Um, I'd say probably the most important thing I would say is kind of what I said at the beginning is that despite this injury, I hope you are okay. I hope you are okay mentally and emotionally. If you're not, what can I do to help you? Let's get you in a good place so that you can then, you're in a good place mentally, emotionally, so you can take logical steps forward to deal with this injury. And I would reassure them, I'm sure all of your listeners, that they have worth and that they are of value and that um, they have gifts and skills beyond these musical ones. Because we never know if when they'll be given or taken away. That's just kind of part of this life, and that's one of the I think one of the greatest challenges is discovering what we can do, what we have to offer. So I think that's what I would say most importantly to them.
That's awesome. So beautiful. The reason why I asked that question is because I was in that situation. I had heard a musician on another podcast who had gone through an injury, and in the thick of mine, I was able to go and approach them. And I just want to give people that opportunity with this show.
Yeah.
The second question, my favorite thing to ask everyone, if you could go back to that time and while you're in with the Santa Fe group, and you had the opportunity to either take away your injury experience or leave it there, that power was in your hands, what would you choose to do?
I would go through it again. I would absolutely leave it there. I won't claim to have handled that situation perfectly in every way, but I certainly think it changed me for the better. At some point, I was able to find the humility to accept my situation, and just come to a new discovery about myself and who I was. And then the recovery period of becoming a singer again, learning how to sing, taught me all kinds of other lessons about diligence and perseverance, because we didn't quite get into this, but singing was always something that had come pretty naturally for me, and I didn't have to work very hard to sound good. Coming back from this injury, I had to work harder than I've ever had to work on anything to be able to sing again. And so it's I learned so many important lessons from it. Absolutely would not take that away. I would choose to go through it again. So.
Yeah. The obstacle becomes the opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So thank you so much for sharing that. Like I said, it's my favorite thing to ask because I haven't had somebody who has said, yeah, I didn't learn anything from it. Nobody has said that, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's just the greatest lessons we learn are through the hardest times, I think. And and I'm so grateful that you were willing to share your story and the things you've learned, the spiritual experiences you've had. I hope that no matter what people believe, that they were able to feel that out there and feel your heart and feel the growth and hope and faith that you were able to come to through that. And so thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And to all of you out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us for another conversation on Trust the Process. Keep on keeping on, guys. You all have worth, as Shea said. You all have infinite and divine worth. And keep on keeping on and keep trusting the process. Hey, before you go, we need your help with something real quick. Somewhere out there's a musician who is going through an injury or just a tough time. There may even be an educator with a student in that situation that they don't know how to help. We need your help in getting this message to them. Would you do them the favor of sharing this episode on your socials and with your friends? Also, cliche that it may have become, leaving a rating and a review actually does help people find us, not just boost our ego. So would you take a quick second and leave us a review so that musician can find us more easily? If you want to reach out to me personally, I would love to hear from you. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message button in the show notes of the episode. You can do that on any episode on your chosen podcast platform except YouTube. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I want to extend another heartfelt thanks to my team, without which this podcast would not be able to happen. Thanks to Daniel Baldwin, our audio engineer, Kevin West, our music and sound effects coordinator, and Dana Lovell, our promotional materials coordinator. So to all of you out there in podcast land, keep on keeping on and trust the process.